And it won't even cost you a quarter. I hope you guys get that reference. If you don't, check out the Two Dope Dudes. They've got the Elevated News podcast, and it's great. It's a great listen. It's Friday. It's 5:34 p.m. and we made it, folks. We made it. I don't know about you, but it's been a long week. For me, nothing bad. Just it's been a long week. I was up late last night, working on a project I've got cooking up. I know I've been a little quiet this week, but everything's okay with me, and I hope the same thing can be said about yourself. Folks, we are live on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. So drop your comments below. I'll try to display them on screen like I'm displaying this screen right now. Or this comment I'm displaying on screen right now. Genetic Memory Farms says, "Good day, Cole. I was just wondering if you were going to post this weekend." Yep. A little bit of an impromptu live, but we got some news to cover. Some cat on the internet says, "Greetings, fellow humans. Greetings back to you. Happy Friday. I hope you're all having a good one." It is May 23rd, 2025. I don't know if I already mentioned that. We're going to be discussing the Illinois cannabis operators that have been struggling lately. There's been a few reports that have come out, and we'll talk about that. We'll be talking about the latest in the cannabis odor-proof bill. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, I'll try to give a little bit of a brief synopsis later. There's some news, at the state level with regard to CBAI, one of the largest cannabis industry groups in the state. They're calling for, they're warning that 280E might be revoked at a state level, which would certainly be an interesting development. I'm not aware of any state having ever done anything like that. They recently met with Governor Pritzker. We'll look at that picture in a little bit. There's some hemp talk we'll have. Always got to talk hemp with the recent Texas ban. There's also been some interesting comments made by some really big operators in the state that are looking to segue into that hemp market. We've also got some news regarding a cannabis regulator. You may not have heard about this before. It's a pretty interesting story. We've covered some of this in the past, but definitely some new developments today. Brandon Krieger says, "Always great to see you, Cole." Brandon, it's good to see you here. I always think about that time we smoked weed at the Capitol. It was just around when I started my kind of my break from cannabis, and I was really worried that I would get way too high to talk to you. And I ended up having a really good time. And hopefully I wasn't too high. Hopefully, whatever. There's also a breaking news story just broke right before we went on air regarding some psychedelic policy. So we'll get into that. Big Merv says, "Happy Friday." Happy Friday to you, Big Merv. I'm not sure if I've seen you comment before, so thank you for tuning in. And some cat on the internet said that odorous bill smells worse than a skunk. I agree. We're going to cover all that and more in this episode of
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo. The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memorandum.
The Cole Memo.
The Cole Memo is what allows this whole thing to go on.
I mean, you have to respect the memo.
Hey, this is Tommy Chong, and you're listening and watching The Cole Memo.
All right, if you're catching this broadcast later and you're wondering how to tune in live, I'd say the best way is to go to colememo.com/YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you never miss a stream. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter, or as I guess we're calling it now, X, because I stream from there as well. This podcast also releases for streaming on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcasting platforms. And as a reminder, one of the best ways to support this show is by going to colememo.com/Patreon. It's just $3 a month to become a member, and members get access to episodes before they release to the public. All of my episodes ultimately do release for free on public feeds, but If you'd like to consider supporting the show and getting early access to episodes before they release to the public, consider becoming a member at colememo.com/Patreon. Once again, that's colememo.com/Patreon. And it does cost a lot to do this show, between licensing fees, the cost of travel, the cost of equipment, and more. Hoping to get a little bit of a new setup here. I announced it on the show, so now it's got to happen. And all of this is brought to you by listeners like you. So if Patreon's not your thing, you can also make a one-time monthly or yearly contribution at colememo.com/support. And if you can't support the show financially, that's totally fine. One of the best ways to support the show is by smashing that like button, sharing the show with your friends, or leaving a positive review from wherever you're listening from. I know you hear all of the content creators say it, but seriously, if you smash that like button, it does a lot to help the show. And damn it, it's Friday. Let's fucking crack open a cold one, shall we? You can get cannabis infused beverages delivered right to your door. That might have been too much. No such thing as too much, right? I say that because my tolerance is super low, so you might be getting a blazed cold this afternoon. Anyways, though, if you want some of those drinks, this one that I'm sipping on right now is an orange soda. It's got 50 milligrams of THC, but this company offers dosages for everybody. They got low dose, high dose. They got orange soda. They got cola. They got seltzers. I think I even saw they rolled out a Dr. Pepper type soda today. You can get that. You can get anything you want, really. Any of the drinks that you want at drinkcantrip.com/Cole Memo. And when you do that, you will get 15% off, and I will get 15% in-store credit so that I can buy more drinks. Somebody on Instagram said, "Cheers, Cole." They also asked, "Are you back to normal consumption?" No, which is why you're probably about to see me get cooked on air. So cheers. Cheers. Let's do this, shall we? Where do we begin? I don't know if I'm pretty sure I mentioned it. Again, smashing the like button is super, super helpful. So if you haven't done it already, please consider doing so. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Why don't we start off with the Illinois cannabis operators that are struggling? And we'll start off with a press conference. I'll share a little bit of insider information with you. You know, when you watch these news clips and when you read about it online, it's super vague. And I've been talking to people on the ground about what these proposals might actually include. And so I'll share a little bit of that with you this evening. Let's start off with watching this news clip. You may have heard, but cannabis entrepreneurs are struggling within the state of Illinois. Let's watch this news clip, and then there's another one we'll watch after the fact, and I'll share a little bit of word from the street, if you will. Here it is.
Too many fees and too many regulations. Those are the complaints from a group of cannabis business owners.
Social equity license holders say they're struggling to stay afloat and they need state lawmakers to step in. WGN's Jewel Hillary reports.
We really believed in this vision of truly creating economic growth and empowerment within our organizations.
Husband and wife, Rick and Michelle Ringgold, are business partners in the cannabis industry. The couple owns Galaxy in South suburban Richton Park. They got into business several years ago after state lawmakers passed legislation making recreational cannabis legal. Now the Ringgolds have recreational licenses to grow, distribute, and transport cannabis. But they say strict state regulations, high taxes, and limited capital are making it challenging to stay afloat.
Nobody sleeps at night when everything you own is tied up into uncertainty, and that's where we are.
On Sunday morning, the Ringgolds stood in unity with several other entrepreneurs who have cannabis social equity licenses.
The social equity program was meant to right some of the wrongs caused by decades of criminalization and systematic exclusion from the cannabis industry.
Overall, I think all of us had various financial projections based off assumptions before we opened up. And we'd had to throw those out of the window.
To get into the market, craft grow, $10 million. We've mortgaged our homes. We've liquidated our 401k plans. We have went to family and friends to get money.
State Representative LaShawn Ford says the state promised social equity businesses grants to help offset costs, but that money has not been awarded yet.
We want to make sure that we pass legislation to provide the grants, not loans, to these social equity companies. We also want to pass legislation to allow for these social equity dispensaries to allow medical patients to use their dispensaries at the same rate that they are paid at the medical dispensaries. That would help out a great deal.
In the days to come, advocates are headed to Springfield to demand the following. They want lawmakers to impose a moratorium on licensing fees and provide a credit for fees paid before businesses were operating, allow equitable access to capital and grant funding, amend regulations and reduce taxes, and allow medical patients to use medical cards at any licensed dispensary.
What's hurting us the most across the board is the over-regulation, the excessive fees.
A lot of things that we thought would happen from a legislative standpoint really didn't happen. And we don't know when it's going to happen.
Reporting in the Loop, I'm Jewel Hillary.
All right, so that person you saw on screen, Patricia Van Pelt, was actually featured in my mini documentary. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out at colememo.com/minidoc. Let's look at this really quick. So I'm displaying on screen right now. They say impose moratorium on licensing fees. That might make sense to you. Access to capital, that might also make sense to you because they mentioned giving these operators access to grants, not loans. And if you're wondering the difference between that, grants, at least from what I understand, you don't have to pay back, but a loan, I'm sure we all understand, you do. And there might even be interest on those loans, right? So it seems like the proposal is to give these operators access to funding by way of grants so that they can, stop struggling. Now, when we're talking change regulations and reduce taxes, well, what does that mean? Well, what I'm hearing is that we're thinking of, and again, what I'm sharing right now is draft language. This information hasn't been rolled out yet, as we'll cover in this next report. But the word on the street is that we're going to figure out a way to possibly lower our taxes to improve competitiveness with the illicit and out-of-state markets. So, which is interesting because you hear about Michigan potentially considering a higher tax. I personally don't think that's going to happen, but that's just my personal take on the situation. There's a lot of people voicing concern about that. But at the end of the day, people can voice concern all day long. If the state wants more money, they'll find a way to get more money. And Illinois has proved that you can get a pretty good chunk of change if you tax the holy hell out of cannabis, right? You might be wondering, what does change regulations mean? Well, there's a few different proposals that I've seen with regard to that, but one that really stands out to me, and I'd be interested to see if it comes to fruition, is increasing the purchasing limit for adult use customers. So it sounds like they are considering, and again, I want to reiterate for like the second or third time, this is just draft language that I'm sharing with you. It's not official yet, as this next report is going to cover, but I just wanted to share with you some exclusive info, right? And I see we've got comments rolling in. By the way, we are live. So if you want to drop your comment below, we can display them on screen. But yeah, again, we're talking increasing the purchase limit of flower for all adults in state or out of state up to 2.5 ounces, which is interesting. 11.5 grams for concentrate and 1,150 grams Now, I don't know what that means, but this is I'm reading the language from this proposal I got my hands on. 1,150 grams of cannabis infused products. I think they might mean like 1,150 milligrams. I don't think they meant to write grams, but this is what you get sometimes when you have people writing legislation. They do their best, right? So, what I'd be interested to see is when this language actually comes to fruition, what this looks like. You know, I don't want to make assumptions here, but it would be interesting to me to see if we increased only the purchase limit, but not the possession limit, because that could put people in some legal jeopardy. And I'm looking at draft language right now. I'm not looking at an official law or rather a bill. So I would assume that they're also going to increase that possession limit, which would be a big win. But I totally out of left field for me. I mean, I've been pushing for the complete I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, removal of possession limits. I don't think you can call cannabis legal if you're limited on the amount that you can possess for personal use. I don't think I'm not aware of another product in which it's legal. I'm saying that in air quotes, but you are limited on the amount that you can possess. So, you know, sharing a little bit of what I'm hearing on the street, for lack of better words. I'm also hearing with regard to regulations, the idea of offering more flexibility with delivery. So it'll be interesting to see what exactly they mean. But the language I'm looking at is permit drop and go deliveries using automated receipt confirmation and surveillance modeled after Oregon's system, which is an interesting idea. We've had people on from Oregon in the past, and they've talked about how they've literally just bought weed from somebody, thrown it in their front seat, and then drove it to a dispensary that they sell it to, that the dispensary ends up turning around and selling it to customers. And by the way, we've covered on the show in the past, it's one of my favorite reports to play. I'm not going to play it today unless you guys really want to see it. If you drop comments below and you're like, Cole, we need to see this fucking report, I'll grab it for you. But there is a report that was released a few years ago that I play on the show all the time, and it basically talks about the comparison between the regulations to transport cannabis in the state of Illinois and the regulations to transport opioids in the state of Illinois. And with opioids or other dangerous, let's call them dangerous substances like that, I'm going to take it back. I mean, you could say that opioids are dangerous, but I'm going to call them controlled substances. I don't mean to characterize. I'm not trying to yuck your yum if you like opioids. I mean, hell, I like opioids sometimes, like when I'm in pain after surgery. Opioids are pretty fucking lit. You know, everything. I think my soda is kicking in here. I'm losing my words. Everything in moderation is what I was wanting to say. So, anyways, the comparison is pretty interesting when you look at how cannabis is required to be transported in 2 locked containers, essentially, versus opioids, where a DEA consultant on this report literally says you could deliver opioids on a bike. I think cannabis should be able to be delivered on a bike. I don't think that that's a crazy ask. So I'll get to this comment here in a moment. But yeah, that's really this first report. Now there's a new report that just dropped yesterday. I almost skipped over this last point. They sort of discussed it in the report, but the medical card use at any dispensary, currently there are only 55 medical dispensaries, and if you have a medical card in the state of Illinois, those are the only shops you can shop at to get cannabis at the medical tax rate, which is like 1%. And so some adult use dispensaries have offered like basically discounts that offset the adult use taxes so that you're essentially getting it at that medical tax rate. However, I believe the dispensing organization basically eats that cost and is losing money, which is why they want to be able to accept medical cards at any dispensary. And this has been something that's been proposed in the past. It's something we've covered in the past, but it just to keep it short, it has encountered some opposition in the past from some of the licensed operators who feel it's unfair that somebody, a new social equity licensee, might be able to just, start selling medical cannabis. They think from their perspective, speaking on behalf of them, I don't know exactly their perspective because they've not offered much by way of comment. Uh, but I think their perspective is, they've had to pay the fees to be a medical dispensary, and they view it as unfair. If people were just able to like sort of get that license as well. I also think that there's a sort of advantage that you get when you are the one of the 55 dispensaries that are able to sell medical cannabis to medical patients, because medical patients consume more cannabis typically than adult use customers. So, there's definitely an advantage to being one of those locations. So some cat on the internet said, we're about to watch this next report, but I'm trying to acknowledge comments as we go. They say, I know I've seen you in the live chat at Cannabis Legalization News. They should have you on as a guest as well. There's other places as well. More cross-pollination is the way. I agree. I have been on Cannabis Legalization News a few times in the past. Tom and Miggy have both been on my show in the past. And shout out to Two Dope Dudes. I'll display their comment on screen right now. They have a podcast where we've done some cross-pollination in the past and are looking to do that again in the future. So definitely a great idea. And I'm definitely going to continue to do that because, like you say, it's a great way to live, supporting each other and all of that good stuff. I was on High at 9 News earlier this week discussing one of the stories we'll be discussing today. So shout out to the folks at High at 9 News. And some cat on the internet says the new Illinois regulations are still out of whack with Michigan dispensaries. So if they're trying to compete with Michigan, they are doing better. When Miggy and Tom get their dispensaries going, yay. Yeah, I agree. It'll be exciting when they get their dispensary going. It's actually somewhat near me, so I'll try to get over there for their opening day. Let's watch this latest cannabis report on the Illinois operators' struggle to find success in this state of Illinois, specifically the social equity operators. Here's the report.
Imagine paying $40,000 a year for your business license, but your company's barely making any money. That's the reality facing some cannabis business operators.
Suzanne Lemonnier is listening to their concerns and a state representative who says he wants to help.
This area is not built out yet because you've been waiting 3.5 years to get the funding to be able to build it out as your cultivation space.
Yeah. I mean, 40,000 square feet. I mean, you see it.
Ambrose Jackson, the CEO of the 1937 Group, walks us through his facility in Broadview, where he's licensed to grow cannabis, but hasn't been able to. Jackson says a lack of state funding, grants, and what he calls burdensome regulations had halted construction. He'll finally begin next month.
We were required to gain control of a facility before we even applied for our license, not knowing whether or not we would be awarded a craft grow license.
Jackson pays a total of $50,000 a month for property tax, insurance, and his lease.
Expecting that I would be able to get this building up and running, expecting that I would have funding and low interest grants provided by the state.
But he says that didn't happen, causing Jackson to pivot. His company sells cannabis flower, pre-rolls, and manufactures vape devices.
Primarily, our biggest seller here is called our Terp Kings device. So we'd create our formulation here.
The 1937 Group also makes edibles. Jackson says his products are sold in dispensaries throughout the state of Illinois. After 3.5 years, he's finally making a profit.
It is extremely difficult, and we do feel like our legislators, to a degree, have abandoned us. We haven't had any reprieve, any changes that have positively affected our ability to thrive in this industry since licenses were awarded 5 years ago.
Jackson, who is also the co-founder of the Black Cannabis Operators, a coalition group of owners in the cannabis industry, reached out to State Representative LaShawn K. Ford for help.
I'm listening to them and I hear their concerns. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we pass this before we leave on May 31st and send it over for the governor to sign it.
Ford says he's introducing the Cannabis Omnibus Bill in the House, which would ease the burdens of struggling cannabis business operators.
They no longer have to pay their licensing fees. 100% waiver. That's $40,000 that some have been paying for 3 years or more without having a business.
Ford says the bill will be filed this week with the goal of voting on it by May 31st. Suzanne Lemonnier, CBS News, Chicago.
So yeah, we'll see. They definitely got to get that done by May 31st. From what I understand, if they don't get it done by May 31st, that's a weird camera angle. If they do not get it done by May 31st, then they will have to get more votes. More votes are required in the state of Illinois past that deadline. What is that deadline called? I don't know. I'm learning as I go. But I did hear that if somebody does not get their bill passed by May 31st, the requirement, the threshold to get that bill passed actually increases. And if somebody knows the rule or mechanism in which that's required, definitely comment below and I'll share it on screen because I'm always looking to learn more. Again, I try to be very transparent with you all. I always like to make the joke that cannabis has been a gateway drug for me to politics, not to other substances. Cannabis has really served as a gateway drug to me to politics because I follow these policies and have slowly learned by way of secondhand smoke, if you will, how the process works. And so I'm curious what you all think about this. There's a lot of different things coming from cannabis operators, and we're about to get into more of that. I got some comments in, so we'll move on to those stories here in a second. But Genetic Memory Farm says, okay, I'm not trying to bleep on anybody's parade. You can fill in what they might be saying here. But we're kind of ignoring the issue, and all these ideas are just avoiding the issues. 6 companies have captured about 70 to 80% of the market. And then they continue by saying, these few companies are politically fighting to keep everyone else out of the market. And they say, who is designated medical versus tax rates is kind of moot when we're really talking about market capture. I tend to agree with you, but I will say that one thing you won't hear, this is a challenge that I think I've issued in the past. If any operators are listening, one thing you won't hear from operators is support for a more open system. And that's because this is something I cover in my mini documentary. If you haven't checked it out already, that is because in Illinois, we have paired the concept of social equity with the concept of limited licensing and limited participation. And I don't know, it's something that I have, again, I have put a big focus on in my mini documentary, which you can watch now at colememo.com/mini-doc for free. It's something that I just don't understand, because if you limit participation and the only mechanism of enforcement is the criminal law, then you're continuing the drug war. And my question is, if the goal of social equity is to right the wrongs of what happened in the past and the disproportionate impact, how are you going to right those wrongs? And if somebody has an answer for me, I'd love it, because it would make me feel a lot better about everything that we're doing right now. Because honestly, the idea that we're continuing the war on drugs to basically protect the profits of all licensed operators is one that I have trouble swallowing. I want to be clear that I think that you can limit licenses if you want to, but the state should not be involved in that limitation. I think, just like we do with every other business, the locality, township, or city, or local government, if you will, should be involved in limiting the businesses that they want in their own communities. And again, they already do this with other businesses, so I don't know why cannabis is treated as an exception to this idea, but it is, and it is in many states. And again, if you have an answer for me as to what makes cannabis any different, because commonly what people will say um, is that look at Oregon, look at Michigan. This is what they'll say to me in reply when I say, why not just open the market? And they'll say, look at Oregon, look at Michigan. They had open licensing and the prices got so low that it was hard for people to make money. And my question has always been, did we legalize cannabis so that people could make money? Or did we legalize cannabis so that in recognition that these policies that we've let play out for quite a while are wrong? I thought that that was why we legalized cannabis. But it seems like cannabis legalization is driven by revenue, whereas cannabis decriminalization is actually more what I'm discussing, and it's got to focus on justice, delivering justice for a wrong. Again, so it seems like legalization is kind of focused on monetary value, and I don't know. I just never, you go back to those movements, and I've covered this on the show in the past. You go back to Hash Wednesday. I think you can actually go to colememo.com/hash Wednesday. I don't know if I've got this link set up. I don't. Maybe it's UIUC. Yes. Go to colememo.com/UIUC and you can actually read about protests that happened in Illinois going all the way back to the 70s. And I actually interviewed some of the participants in these protests. I created a free to view photo archive with, video of these protests, pictures of these protests. These are people, I almost said children. They're not children, they're college kids. This is at the University of Illinois, and people are being arrested as the some are smoking marijuana, some are simply watching. These are kids being arrested, their futures ruined. This all happened in Illinois and in many other states. We're all sort of familiar with this fight, right? My point is, if you went to these crowds and you asked these college kids, hey kids, what are you fighting for? I don't think they would have said, well, we're trying to make cannabis legal because we want people to make money, but we don't want too many people to be able to sell cannabis because then people can't make money. Because again, that's what this is about. No, they they would not have said that. I don't think that would have been a point of discussion at any of that's not the roots of this movement. The roots of this movement are that we should be able to smoke cannabis on the quad, for example, or places where we smoke cigarettes. I've tried to be a little bit more respectful about people's preference on secondhand smoke because it is a real concern. And I just try to be respectful. But anyways, check out colememo.com/UIUC. You don't have to take it from me what this movement was about. You can listen to the interviews I did with some of the students. And actually, some of the students were in these pictures. For example, I interviewed this student right here. Let me see if I can make that bigger. Of course I can't. I hope you can see my mouse. It's this student with the mic. There's a guy in a suit right here, and the mic is being handed to him. There's also a student sitting right here, and I interviewed her as well, and several other people to capture, what their perspective was. Here's a better picture of that kid that I interviewed. He's a grown adult at this point, but here he was a kid. He was probably like 18 to 21 years old, and it's funny how things change. It's funny how the attitude of the movement has changed. And I'll take that back. It's not funny. It's actually pretty messed up, but I digress. I've gone on a tangent here. Tom G has been on the podcast in the past, and he asks, Is it equitable to require people to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to enter a lottery? And if they don't get a license because their ball wasn't chosen, they're potentially financially ruined? That's a good question. What do you think, chat? Is that equitable? Um, like I say, I just get caught up in the idea that the criminal law, which has existed for a long time now, is the primary enforcement mechanism for our cannabis law. Like if it was something else, like if it was just like a business offense, like, you know, if you buy one of those fucking food trucks and you don't have the appropriate license, they're not going to pull up and arrest you, from what I understand. Correct me if I'm wrong. Comment below, because again, I'm learning. But from what I understand, you're not going to get arrested for operating a food truck. You're probably going to get slapped with some fines, though. And I think that if I'm not saying that selling cannabis without a license should be a finable offense, but if you want to make it an offense, I think that is more proportionate to what's going on. Throwing that person in jail alongside sex offenders, murderers, rapists, which I think are also sex offenders. I don't know. Let's just say bad people. Yeah, bad people, you know, generally speaking, people that harm others in that way are bad people. And generally speaking, people that provide cannabis or drugs to each other, yeah, I'm, in my experience, pretty good people. I'm sort of saying that with a little bit of humor. If you don't know me enough, I'm trying to be a little funny here because that topic can get really depressing really quickly. Let's move on to the odor-proof bill, which has been something I've been tracking for quite some time. And we will do that right after this message.
Are you all ready for America's new #1 D9 gummy line? That's right, we are bringing to you Parody Gummy. These vegan gummies are manufactured in a safe harbor facility, so you know they're going to be clean and safe, and they're not going to give you any of the runaround. Coming in, we have 3 amazing flavors for you. We have the Raspberry Riots. Also, we have the Sleepy Joes if you need something to help you sleep at night. And if you're feeling like raging and having a party time, that's right, we have the Pineapple Bad Hombre. If you're feeling like a bad hombre, make sure you head over to www.parodygummy.com and secure your bag today.
Yes. Shout out to Jason from High at 9 News. Try out their gummies. Cannabis Critique says, got here just in time. Yeah, you did. You got here just in time for our odor-proof update. Let's talk about it. I've got some news to share, and we'll share a little bit of knowledge along the way. So let's do this, shall we? So if you go to ilga.gov, as in Illinois General Assembly.gov, you'll be presented with this page, and I'm trying to show you how to use this website, even though if you could see right here in the red text at the top, there is going to be a new site. So maybe by the time you watch this, the site will have been updated, but hopefully, I don't know. I kind of like this old Craigslist style webpage because it works well. It's quick. If it's not broke, don't fix it. That's how I look at it. But anyways, all right, let's look at legislation. So we're going to look for the odor-proof bill, which is Senate Bill 42. And in order to do that, we're going to go to bills and resolutions. And you can see maybe some of the links that I've clicked on here in the past. And we're going to scroll down to Senate Bill 42, which is the vehicle code, cannabis and vehicle. And today you'll see that it was, well, first of all, it was recently amended, which is something I discussed. We didn't see the language that I had discussed, but I am aware of the language, and we'll have a brief discussion on that. But today it was placed on 3rd reading, and the final action deadline was extended to May 31st, which again, as I said earlier, if it doesn't pass on May 31st, then it requires a higher threshold to pass. So let's talk about the amendment. And if you'd like to view that, we'll do that. Go to the top here and you click full text. Then we'll look at House Amendment 1. And what House Amendment 1 does is it deletes lines 6 through 11 on page 3. So what does that mean? Let's go back to introduced. We'll go down to page 3. Here's lines 6 through 11, which might look really important. I'll read the language here. If a motor vehicle is driven or occupied by an individual 21 years of age or older, a law enforcement officer may not stop or detain the motor vehicle or its driver, nor inspect or search the motor vehicle, the contents of the motor vehicle, or the operator or passenger of the motor vehicle solely based on the odor of burnt or raw cannabis. So they are deleting this language, and you might be saying, whoa, 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 wait a minute. It's okay, folks. It's okay. They're still deleting the odor-proof language. And frankly, in my discussions with lawyers, the number one question I always get is, what the hell is this paragraph and why is it here? And you might be wondering, well, Cole, isn't that the whole point? You've been talking about this for a while. Aren't we trying to prevent law enforcement from stopping, detaining, and searching a motor vehicle or the contents of the vehicle or the operator or the passenger of the motor vehicle solely based on the odor of burnt or raw cannabis? Yes, absolutely. That is what we're doing, or that's what we're trying to do. But we can do that by simply striking the words odor-proof from the bill. This is not needed. This language is not needed, according to the legal professionals that I speak to. The only thing that's needed is striking the odor-proof language. And you might be asking yourself, why? Why is that the only thing that is needed? Well, let's do some more knowledge share here. We're going to colememo.com. We're going to look up Supreme Court. And you'll actually see some of the lawyers that have shared this perspective with me, who, by the way, are also, they've helped to draft some of this language. And Cannabis Critique says, because the lawyers said so. Exactly. Well, it's a little bit of that and a little bit of what I'm about to show you. Genetic Memory Farms, I'm going to chuckle at this comment. I will share my screen, though. We're going to go to colememo.com. And so it has a little bit to do with these defense lawyers who have experience defending against that language, but it also has to do with the Supreme Court decision. So the Supreme Court already ruled that the odor of burnt cannabis cannot be used as a reason to search a vehicle. So that's why that language, we'll go back over here, this language, the base solely based on the odor of burnt or raw cannabis, this part is definitely not needed because the Supreme Court already ruled on it. And by removing the odor-proof language, this would also not be needed. Does it provide additional clarity? Absolutely, yes. But the lawyers that I've talked to, they say if you just remove this odor-proof language, that will, first of all, deliver on what the Supreme Court requested, and you can read about that. Look, I've got a lot of content I'm displaying on screen. If you go to colememo.com and search up Supreme Court, you'll see a lot of what I've done on this subject, including the rulings. So you can hear the defense attorneys talk about it. You can maybe see some of these episodes I've done, episode 49 and episode 47, for example. But I've also written articles on these rulings. Here's two specifically. The burnt cannabis odor is insufficient for search. So you can read that full ruling in this story here. And then if you want to read the odor-proof ruling, which is really what we're addressing here, that's this story here. And in this ruling, which I have included the primary source document, which is actually the ruling in and of itself, which I'll scroll down and show you. Here it is. You can see the ruling. And if you look at the opinions delivered in this ruling, you'll find that they encourage the General Assembly to remove that odor-proof language so that there's less confusion regarding this whole issue. So as I understand it, that's where this stands right now. You can see that that's reflected on the Illinois General Assembly's website. And the last bit of information I will share with you before I get to the comments that we've got in on this subject is that I'm hearing that there's a little bit of a disagreement on this, and that some people are insistent that that paragraph stay in. And again, I understand it. It does provide additional clarity that might be helpful to somebody if law enforcement is pulling you over and saying, I smell raw cannabis. I think I can search your car because of raw cannabis. Well, that's when you stop talking to them. You shouldn't talk much to law enforcement anyways. And you should request your lawyer be present, because this has become a conversation where we're talking about laws here, and I'm not a lawyer. And yeah, like I said, that paragraph does provide additional clarity, but all of the lawyers that I've spoke to, some of which are members of the Illinois State Bar Association, say that if you just remove odor-proof, they can do their job. They can get you out of that, and it'll provide the clarity that we need. So some little bit of good news, little bit of bad news. Here's the thing. I'm not going to make any promises here. I don't know where this stands. It looks like one other detail that I didn't cover, put this back on screen here. If we go back to the bill summary, it looks like the sponsor, if I'm not mistaken, changed. I could be wrong. I might be wrong. No, I'm correct. Yeah, the sponsor changed. So it used to be Representative Tarver in the House. Now the House sponsors are Representative Lisa Davis, Will Gazzardi, and Kevin John O'Lickall, if that's how you say their names. And look, I don't know. I'm just trying to tell you, I don't know how this is going to play out. We're getting really close to that May 31st deadline. As I pointed out, they did extend the third reading / final action to that May 31st deadline. But realize this, folks, with that House amendment, even if it passes the House, it's got to pass the Senate now. So this bill, this is going to get a little complicated for a second. Bear with me here. This bill has already passed the Senate as is. The House has added that amendment that I was just discussing based on negotiations that have occurred. And as a result of passing that amendment, it must go back through the Senate. If they would have just voted to pass it, that would have been it could have gone to Governor Pritzker's desk. And I actually wrote about this, you guessed it, on colememo.com. You can read it right here. Cannabis odor search ban advances in Illinois, but a compromise could undermine its intent. That's the headline. I'll try to put that in the show notes for people if you're wanting to read about it. And if you're watching live right now, I always try to go back and add the show notes at a later time. If they would have just passed this as is, it would have gone to Governor Pritzker's desk. But the reason I'm showing you this is because there was a lot of disagreement in the House, and I covered that in great detail on this article. I also, if I go back here, the episode that was released right after this article, I play clips. So if you're not much of a reader, if you'd rather hear me talk about it, episode 199 is how you could hear me talk about that. And I play clips from the hearing, and you ultimately hear that they basically promised, the House sponsor promised, they would not vote to pass this bill. They would amend the bill. And this amendment that I'm showing right now is what they came up with. In my article, I described a different amendment. Luckily, we didn't see that materialize. But I digress. Sorry for getting in the mud there for a second. I hope I didn't lose you. I hope you're not sleeping. Cannabis Critique asks, does the back seat qualify as unreachable? My new whip is a hatchback and has no trunk, so kind of curious what out of reach is legally. This is one of the best questions. People ask this all the time. I've got a pickup truck, Cole, and I don't have a lockbox in the back. What am I supposed to do about this? The answer is unclear to me. I also want to make it clear to folks that while I do talk to a lot of lawyers, I am not one, and I'm not in a position to give anybody legal advice. But this question gets asked often, so you're not alone here. Cannabis Critique. Some people have like SUVs, and they're like, "Well, I've got 2 rows of seats between me, and I've got my bag all the way in the back next to the hatchback. Am I good?" I would say you're good because the way the law reads, and I can probably pull it back up here, is it just must be reasonably inaccessible, which is a vague. I get it. It's vague. Um, no, it's actually just inaccessible. So, I don't know. Another commenter says accessible to the driver would be the same as a gun or alcohol. Yes, I get that. But I believe the way this language reads is that even a passenger, it must be inaccessible for everybody. Yeah. So let's look at this language again. Put it back on screen. And this is where it gets even fucking, excuse my language, more difficult. So no driver may use medical cannabis. This is the medical cannabis part. But no passenger shall have cannabis within any passenger area of the motor vehicle upon a highway, except in a secured, sealed, resealable, odor-proof, child-resistant container that's inaccessible. And so, yeah, it's a little unclear to me. We're having some good discussion here. Somebody said, "I always thought alcohol was based on the seal, and this specifically mentions resealable containers." Yep, and I actually wrote about that topic recently. That's something that was a pretty recent fight where we got that to pass. Actually, I think it's in my most recent article at colememo.com. Yeah, it is. So if you go to colememo.com, I'm doing a lot of plugging of my own. This is actually a story we're going to cover later. This story, Illinois may cut 280E tax relief, according to an industry group. If you scroll all the way down to cannabis policy highlights in Illinois and you click to expand, do a little search for resealable. In August of 2021, Governor Pritzker signed House Bill 1443 into law, and this redefined the cannabis container to include the term resealable. And this made it so that cannabis wasn't a one-way product. Back to what Cannabis Critique said, they thought alcohol was based on the seal, and this specifically mentions resealable containers. So that's where that language came from. And I'll just briefly say this is anecdotal, and again, not to be meant to be legal advice, but I will say that law enforcement has told me in the past that, like, if you buy a bottle of wine from a restaurant, for example, and you bought the bottle of wine, but you're not going to drink the whole bottle of wine, there are protocols in which and I don't think they're defined protocols, but there are protocols that some restaurants will take where they'll like put plastic wrap and a cork back in the alcohol or the wine in this analogy, and basically make it so that, let's call it reasonably inaccessible. Again, though, I don't have any answers tonight, unfortunately. This is a super, super good question that Cannabis Critique asked. And if you haven't checked out their content, by the way, they are a content creator. They review cannabis in Illinois, so check them out. But yeah, this is a great question. Get it all the time, and unfortunately, don't have a good answer to it right now. And I am very sorry about that. But I hope that none of you have to find out the hard way what the answer is. That's what I will say. All right, well, let's talk about 280E relief. The largest cannabis industry association has raised some red flags, I'd say, in the past few days that Illinois may cut 280E tax relief in order to balance the budget. You can read this full story at colememo.com. I'm not going to get too far into it, but I'll just say, if you're asking, what the hell is 280E? Well, I believe that 280E has something to do with our friend Al Capone. Could be wrong on this. Google it, folks. Google everything that I say on this show. But Al Capone owned a business in which he was selling, I think, bootlegged alcohol. And what he was doing was he was writing off his taxes for this illegal business that he was operating. I could be wrong. He might have been selling something else. Again, comment below, Google me, whatever. Google 280E Al Capone. How about I Google it? How about that? Let's just see if I'm on the right track. But long story short is somebody was running an illegal business and they were trying to basically file and write off taxes uh, on that business. Oh, okay. Here it is. So this is Google AI. So let's take it for what it's worth. Maybe do a actual search yourself. But here's a little summary from AI. And the reason I say that is because, as you can see right here, AI responses may include mistakes. And I've encountered several instances in which that is true. But this sounds like what I was familiar with, so we're gonna roll with it. While not directly mentioned in Section 280E, this section is relevant to Al Capone's case because his primary business was illegal alcohol production and distribution during Prohibition. This illegal activity would not have been subject to provisions of 280E, meaning he would not have been able to be allowed to deduct expenses associated with his illegal enterprises. So, from what I understand, 280E was kind of inspired, if you will, by Al Capone's criminal activities. So to wrap that back around to cannabis, and if you're not sure what deductions are, let's say you're a cannabis operator and you buy a bunch of scissors because you're cutting plants. And normally in a business, if you buy equipment, I'm not an accountant, so take this for what it's worth. But from what I understand, if you buy equipment for your business and you owe taxes at the end of the year, you can do deductions, which basically show that you are paying taxes. For example, I paid taxes on those scissors in this analogy. And so you provide that as a deduction. It's hard to say that for some reason. And you can basically write off those expenses, thus making it so that you may not owe money on taxes. Again, this is my layman understanding. And cannabis operators are not able to do this. And according to CBAI, and CBAI is not alone in this, but from what I've read on their materials, they say the inability to deduct these expenses can make the effective tax rate on dispensaries more than 70%. Yeah, I've heard 70 to 80%. So in other words, everything you make, take out 70 to 80% of those taxes because you're going to be paying them because, you're not able to deduct those expenses. Therefore, you're going to owe taxes. If you can't tell, I'm speaking a little bit out of my understanding here, but just wanted to share the story because not only did they share that earlier this week, this is the post that they shared earlier this week, but they just added more posts today. And I've personally done some research on the legislation that exists in Illinois today, and I've not found any legislation yet that has basically put this officially on the chopping block, but it seems like it's part of a discussion that's happening in the state of Illinois because, again, we're in budget season. I think they've got to get a budget addressed, preferably again before May 31st. And let's just say that it'll be interesting. And so they're looking for any and every way to make up that gap. I believe there's been an identified gap in our budget. And the way that CBAI describes it is that they are basically looking, they say, now lawmakers are considering eliminating this crucial support to help balance the state's budget. So this is interesting because I'm not aware of any state, and if you are, please comment below, that has repealed 280E. When you repeal 280E, you're kind of acknowledging that cannabis should not be treated as a controlled substance like Al Capone with alcohol, right? In the days of Prohibition, because it's supposed to be legal, right? But so states like Illinois and several others, let's see. I have an article here that I don't know. I just Googled this article. It looks like Arkansas, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Maine, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi. I'm like that Johnny Cash song, I've Been Everywhere, Man. Let me try to do that again with the Johnny Cash tempo. I've been to Missouri, Montana. No, I can't do it. I tried. I hope you guys get the joke that I'm trying to make here. So I've not heard of any state repealing 280E. And again, when you provide this relief to operators, you're basically acknowledging that cannabis should not be treated like a controlled substance, and therefore you can write off those taxes. Now, that only affects operators at the state level. You still would have to pay 280E at a federal level, which brings us to a really good question that I've not completely read yet, but I'm displaying it on screen right now, which could be dangerous, but whatever. So what if we just subject the big 6 operators to 280E and allow social equity to write that off? Then can we make those large couple ones pay the federal tax bill for the social equity operators? Well, again, just like I was saying, and maybe you were typing this as I was saying it, but everybody still has to pay the federal tax bill. This is just 280E at a state level. And from what I've heard from operators, it is a significant amount at the state level, but it's less than at the federal level. I don't know, though. This is just anecdotes that I've heard. But I would say that I don't know if that's legal, what you just proposed, like focusing on the big 6 operators. But to Brandon's point, who just commented, Tom, I'm thinking you're referring to cannabis industry lawyer Tom Howard from Cannabis Legalization News. Brandon says, Tom had an episode on getting around 280E. I'm pretty sure the big companies are aware. Yes, there are ways around 280E, and I think 2 operators have successfully gotten money back. I could be wrong on this. This is getting into weeds that I don't smoke. I'm just joking. This is getting into territory that I'm just not familiar with. So, but I am familiar loosely with the idea that it seems to be pretty well known at this point that some of the biggest operators are just saying, nah, we're not paying 280E anymore. And I know that I've gotten the impression it makes some investors a little bit nervous because they're like, that's the federal government you're telling that you're not paying. But so far, so good. I've heard that multiple of the large companies, some that aren't even in this state, I believe, I believe TrueLeave, if we Google it. Let's Google it to make sure I don't get sued by TrueLeave. TrueLeave 280E. And let's see here. What do we find? It's the wrong screen. Yeah, this is apparently on February 29th. TrueLeave reported receiving $113 million in 280E tax refunds. And this is the story that I was like faintly recalling, where it seems like somehow they figured out a way to get around this. And they're not the only one. They're the one that came to mind. It looks like they were also seeking 31 million in state tax refunds. I don't know if that has to do with 280E as well. But yeah, do some research on that. I mean, if you find this interesting, I personally don't find the 280E stuff very interesting. It gets a little bit into like, I'm just not a business person. I don't have any aspirations to be a business person, and it gets into a lot of business discussion, frankly. So one thing though that I did want to point out in that article that I found to be notable. Can you hear that? A car alarm's going off. This must be what it feels like to be in Chicago. Sorry, folks. That was a Chicago joke for you. I've had guests on from Chicago, and you hear trains more than cars, actually. So maybe a stupid joke on my behalf. This picture here at the top, this was actually, from what I understand, taken on May 20th, which was earlier this week. This is the Cannabis Business Association, well, members of the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois, including their executive director, which is 3 people in from the left. That's Tiffany Chappell Ingram. They're meeting with Governor Pritzker. So we'll see, what they can get done. According to their post, which I'm displaying right here, it says CBAI was proud to join Illinois cannabis license holders in a meeting yesterday with Governor Pritzker to discuss opportunities to strengthen the state's legal cannabis industry. Many thanks to the governor for his time and support. And I can only imagine that the topic of 280E came up because they've been posting about it. I can only imagine that the topic of hemp came up because there's been a few people in this picture that have been on my show that are definitely opposed to hemp, just the concept entirely. Yeah, I've actually had a fair number of folks in that photo on the show in the past. So, kind of interesting now that I look at that lineup. I'm like, oh, you've been on the show, all that. But okay, that's 280E. And I do think we're going to close out with these next two stories, and I'll save some of these others for another time because this show has gone on a little bit longer than I expected it to. And I'm guessing it has to do with this cannabis drink that I cracked open. And if you didn't catch it earlier, this cannabis drink you can acquire now at colememo.com. Oh, whoops, not at colememo.com, at drinkcantrip.com. That's drinkcantrip.com/Cole Memo. I'm pouring up a little bit more, which might be a little dangerous because I'm already feeling it. When I say dangerous, I mean I'm probably gonna have a good fucking time tonight. My tolerance is so low now that I've pretty much altogether stopped smoking cannabis. And for the most part, I've stopped using cannabis. But not tonight. Not tonight, my friends. Okay. All right. So in the past, once again, you can get that drink at drinkcantrip.com/Cole Memo. They got high dose, low dose options, all different types of flavors, orange, cola, seltzer. They just rolled out a Dr. Pepper. They had root beer. A lot of tasty drinks, honestly. And like I say, all different doses. So we're going to move on to some Illinois regulator news here in a moment. But somebody said, I think I'm just disgusted with Illinois and its cash grab. If everybody can't grow, then this is all bull BS, I'll say. I can make booze at home without a license, just not sell it. Yeah, you can share it, though. Pretty sure you can share it. Can't do that with homegrown cannabis, which is pretty stupid. And by the way, if you're wondering why you can't grow cannabis at home as an adult without a medical card, if you're wondering why is the health department telling me whether or not I can grow a plant at home? Good question. I discuss it in my mini documentary, which you can watch now at colememo.com, colememo.com/mini-doc. Wow, this drink's really hitting me. I'm slurring my words, or I'm just, it's been a while since I've been live. Who knows? I don't want to blame it on the drink. Okay, so I recently read something that kind of had to do with an Illinois cannabis regulator, and let me just pull it up so you can see it your fucking self. So, all right. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts Office of the Attorney General. You might be thinking, Cole, I thought we were talking about an Illinois cannabis regulator. We are. You might be thinking, Cole, why are you reading notices from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Office of the Attorney General? It's a good question. I don't know. I'm just joking. I saw this on LinkedIn and it caught my attention. So let's do a little bit of searching here. Basically what this is it's regarding the open meeting law. And if you're not familiar with what that is, similar laws exist in many states, but the Massachusetts open meeting law requires public bodies to conduct business transparently, basically allowing closed door executive sessions only for narrowly defined purposes. And like I said, similar laws exist in many other states to ensure public accountability. So on May 19th, this is what we're looking at right here. The Massachusetts Attorney General's office found that the state's Cannabis Control Commission violated this law during two executive sessions held on November 25th and December 4th, 2024. The commission met privately to discuss how to proceed after David Lakeman, then a finalist for executive director, withdrew from consideration. Those closed-door discussions included fallback plans and salary ranges, which the AG concluded were not valid reasons to exclude the public. And if you're still wondering, Cole, what does this have to do with Illinois? The name I just said, David Lakeman, is what has to do with Illinois. So let me switch my screen here. I wrote about this. I'll have this linked in the show notes. David Lakeman is the Illinois Cannabis Division Manager at the Illinois Department of Agriculture, and he actually applied to go to the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission all the way back in October. Well, at least he had his interview, his public interview, all the way back in October 28th of 2024, which is hard to believe. That's, just in a few months going to be a year ago. I broke down the whole hearing. I actually watched it on air. I'll put that here episode in the description, including this article and everything else that I'm loosely referencing. You can actually see his live interview. I'm showing a little clip right now without sound so that you can kind of get a vibe for what you can see. If you've ever been in a job interview, it's super awkward, and that's exactly what this feels like when you watch it, but it's kind of cool. I love this. I wish we had transparency like this in Illinois. Unfortunately, we don't. And this was literally live streamed on the internet. I would love to see our Illinois cannabis regulators interviewed live on the internet, besides on, the Cole Memo and the Chillinois podcast. I actually had David Lakeman on in the past on the Chillinois podcast. I've had other regulators on this show as well, but I don't think that this show is the appropriate venue for those types of interviews. I think that conducting their business are the things that I would like to see broadcast on the internet for transparency. Anyways, back to the Attorney General's ruling. Lakeman, who like I said, is currently a cannabis regulator in Illinois, had been publicly identified as the top contender for this role, which is a detail I had reported on in the past. I shared that article. I'll have that linked in the show notes. The commission later appointed Travis Ahern as executive director, and I wrote about that as well. David Lakeman ultimately declined that role at the Massachusetts Cannabis Commission, and it's unclear to me exactly why. Who knows? He didn't provide comment regarding that decision. He just did not accept the position. So the AG ordered the commission to release unredacted minutes of the sessions, complete with the and also they required the Cannabis Control Commission to complete executive session training. In other words, they're like, you got to watch this video so that you understand the Open Meeting Law Act, which, if you've ever been through something like that in corporate America, is always fun. You got to watch the training video. It's like literally a movie trope at this point, watching a training video, but that's what they got to do. And they also have to avoid future violations. And they cautioned in the order down here at the bottom here, I can't remember where, that repeat offenses could actually be seen as intentional. I think that's down here. So yeah, they say you must watch the video, and we're going to be watching you. And if you do this again, that's going to be considered intentional. And some things could happen to the Cannabis Control Commission, I guess. I don't know what. But, if you're interested in learning more about the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission, it's definitely interesting. And what's really cool about them, again, I just want to say this again, all of the meetings they have and all of the business they discuss is streamed online, except for when they get caught in situations like this. There's been a lot of controversy, I would say, around the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission. So if you find this stuff interesting, Google Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission and have fun. Okay. Well, I think that's good enough for today. I've got other stories to cover. I will briefly cover this, I guess. I thought it was interesting. It's a story from Marijuana Moment, marijuanamoment.net. Pretty good outlet. I would say one of the best, actually. Check them out. They do a lot of, as you might have guessed by the name, coverage on cannabis, but they also do different drugs. And the lawyer who sued the Federal Health Agency over marijuana scheduling will now work there with a focus on psychedelics. So this guy, his name's Matthew Zorn. He's known for suing federal agencies over cannabis and psychedelics policy. He joined the Trump administration as a deputy general counsel at the United States Department of Health and Human Services under Secretary Robert F. Kennedy, according to sources confirmed by Marijuana Moment. If Zorn is ringing a bell for you, if that's a name that's ringing a bell for you, I've mentioned this guy on the show in the past. He has challenged both the DEA and HHS through lawsuits. It's the one you might be thinking of is the one involving cannabis rescheduling. I believe he actually was, yeah, he did a FOIA and was able to obtain the internal agency documents, including HHS's scientific review recommending cannabis rescheduling. Um, and just a really interesting story. He has been involved, like I said, in other cases. And I don't know, there was recently somebody else in the Trump administration that kind of openly talked about their uh, use of mushrooms. And I guess internally, according to this article, this guy, Matthew Zorn, is being referred to as the agency's psychedelics czar. Just kind of interesting. I did not expect that from the Trump administration. I don't know what to expect from the Trump administration, but we're not going to talk about that this evening. We're going to keep our show rolling. We're going to close the show, is what I mean to say. And I'll catch you in the future. I hope you found value in the conversation that I had today. I know I was all over the place, might be on account of many different things, including, I think I mentioned earlier, I was up till like 3 o'clock last night working on a project that you might find some interest and value in. I think it's going to take a few months before I'm done. So sorry for the early teaser with little to no information, but trying to get some stuff cooking for y'all. You know what I'm saying? So I hope you had a good week. I hope you had a great Friday. I hope you're looking forward to the holiday weekend. I hope you get a day off on Monday. Everybody deserves a day off, especially those that have, holy snap. Somebody just made a purchase on Cantrip. Yo, whoever did that has to be tuning in live right now. You know what they did? They saw this and they said, Cole's sipping on a cannabis drink. It's 50 fucking milligrams. Maybe I don't want a 50 milligram drink. Maybe they do. I don't know. But they said, Cole, I'm going to buy some of those drinks because I want to try them too. And when they did that, I got so they made a purchase of $89.99 and I got commission $13.50, motherfucker. And you know what I'm going to do with that $13.50? I'm going to buy more of these fucking drinks. So cheers to you, whoever you are. I swear you got to be watching live, or maybe it's somebody watching a podcast I've done in the past. But again, you can get these drinks at drinkcantrip.com/Cole Memo. If you get them, again, I get a little chunk of that on in-store commission. It's not like I'm getting a check or anything. I'm getting that money to buy more of these products. I love these products. It's naturally derived THC. You can get it delivered to your door. Again, you can buy as much as you want. It's just kind of one of the cool things about federally legal cannabis. What a time to be alive. So if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe, comment below. I like to check back and see what people have to say. I said I definitely spoke out of turn on a few different subjects today. So if you're watching this after the fact and you're like, Cole, you're stupid, you got this wrong, drop that in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. Brandon said, now I won't sleep for months wondering what your project is. Thanks, Cole. Well, I hope that I know you're joking here, but yeah, don't lose sleep over it. Look forward to it. I think it's going to be awesome. I think you're going to find a lot of value in it. That's the hope, at least. But I am going to try to take my time and make sure that I release something that is worth your time and worth everybody's time. And with that, I will leave you with this. There's something else that I think is worth your time if you've not taken it yet. Before I say that, somebody just asked, naturally derived, is that converted CBD or actual THC from the plant? It is actual THC from the plant. Cantrip is very specific about that. The owner of Cantrip has been on my show in the past. They do spend more money to ensure that their chain of custody is from plants. And in fact, it says the hemp in this product was grown in compliance with the United States Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018 and contains less than 0.3% Delta 9. The hemp was sourced from North Carolina. That's what I'm really trying to tell you. But yeah, they're very, very particular about that. They do not use converted cannabinoids. They also don't use anything but sugar cane, so you don't have that high fructose corn syrup bull crap. Just pure sugar cane, because we all love sugar. Genetic Memory Farms says nice, and Brandon drops a fun fact here, which is true. CBG, I believe, is that it's like the mama cannabinoid. Technically, all THC is converted via CBG anyway. Yeah, and you could argue that every time you smoke cannabis, you're converting THCA to Delta 9 THC. But now I'm starting to feel like the well, actually person, the person that's always like, well, actually, I feel like I do that all the time, and I hate it when I do that. But I hope I've said it, I think 2 or 3 times during this podcast. I'm just trying to share what I learned. I hope you learn from it. And I'm looking to learn from you. Comment below so that I can hit that like button if you haven't already. And as I told you, I am working on something that I hope is worth your time. But in the meantime, if you haven't taken a chance, I think my mini documentary is worth your time. You can watch it now at colememo.com/mini-doc. Here's what you can expect to see. It's only an hour long. If you watch it at 2 times speed, you get that motherfucker done in 30 minutes. 30 minutes. And you get to learn why I'm not going to make that joke. You get to learn what are the issues that I see with Illinois cannabis. And if you're not from Illinois and you're like, I don't really fucking care, these issues could also be applied to basically every other state. There's some things Illinois is a little bit unique on, but a lot of it is pretty well standard for cannabis markets across the nation. Somebody commented and said, it sounds like a good company, but what they're using is a plant enzyme native to the plant, not baking CBD with clay and extra myagig with ethanol. We're getting sciencey in the comments. Once again, check out my mini doc at colememo.com/mini-doc. Here's what you can expect if you go and check that out. Happy Friday, everybody.
Beginning January 1st, 2020, the recreational use of cannabis will be legal in the state of Illinois.
Available to stream now, my mini-doc dives into the history of Illinois legalization, starting with
January 1st. What should we expect? The biggest thing that we need people to understand is that January 1, in terms of the criminal justice system here in this state, is the end of prohibition.
See how Illinois missed its chance at real cannabis reform with key failures, including the fact that
the program includes regulation on possession limits.
So people can still be arrested for a possession.
And I want to highlight that in its first year of legalized recreational marijuana in the state of Illinois, they arrested 3 times as many black people for possession than any other race.
We've run into so much cannabis, we've run out of places to put it.
I have represented people and taken their cases through the court system who got charged with more serious crimes only because the police said that they smoked cannabis. And not because the police said you have illegal cannabis, or not because you have too much cannabis, or not because you're high on cannabis, but because I can smell it and that's it.
Attorney goes, he understands that he can't be smoking and his cannabis flower shouldn't be open. And I was like, I'd like to say for the record that I was not smoking and my flower was not open.
So that's where we're at right now in Illinois, and I hope it changes.
Start watching now at colememo.com/mini-doc.